Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you're new here. Welcome to my virtual studio. Today we're going to be painting on Vermillion, a VR app where you can paint just like a regular painter, except you get an undo button and you don't have to clean up afterwards, which is nice. Today, as you can see beside me, we're going to be painting this Bob Ross landscape painting. I've painted this one about 15-ish times in real life with acrylic paint. I teach a lot of workshops and paint nights, and this has been a popular one. And so I'm excited to bring this one to you in VR. And I hope that you learn some stuff about painting landscapes that will help you paint your own landscapes in the future. And most of all, that you just enjoy it and have a good time. So let's jump right into it. Alright, so here we are at our canvas. If this is your first time on Vermillion, a few things might be new for you. I'll try to go through step by step how to do it. If you've been here before, a few things that I say won't be new and you can just pass over them. First is starting with the size of our canvas. So if you haven't already, you can grab up here, set the size of your canvas. I've already done it here, but it'll give you a little green check mark in the middle there. Once you've chosen your size, I've chosen 16 by 20 here. Then you just hold your hand in the middle and it will set the size for you. Now, once you move that size, it stays proportional to the original 16 by 20, whether you go bigger or smaller. Alright, so we're doing a Bob Ross painting here today. We got our paint brushes on our right, we got our palette here on our left, paint thinner bucket here. We can go through. We're going to start with just a nice whitewashed background, just like Bob Ross starts with. So I'll leave my palette there for now. I might pick it up a little bit later. We're going to grab our 2-inch brush here and mix it in with some paint thinner, and then just mix that in with our white and start spreading that across the canvas. You'll be able to see it a little bit, not overly well. And if you're ever just covering the canvas with a single color or anything like that, a little trick that you can do is, we're going to put our brush down here, if it'll let me, and you can just shrink your canvas down. So I'm going to shrink that down to the lowest size. Get some more of that white on there, and it's going to allow you to cover that canvas a lot faster. And do a little bit more up top here. Once you've got that done, we can wash that brush off to get that paint thinner off of that. And I'm just going to set it down for a second so I can stretch this out to our regular size that we were working with. And now we're going to start with the sky. When you do a nature painting, it's always best, and in my mind, maybe you don't agree, to start with the background, work your way to the foreground. As you work your way to the foreground, you're able to do some overlapping, and then that allows you to kind of cover up things and have smooth transitions between what's in the background and what's in the foreground. So we're going to start with the sky. So I'm going to stick with our 2-inch brush here that we've got. And at any time, if you want to reset your palette, just remember you can press the Y button and you'll see it reset there. I'm going to grab some of this light phthalo blue here, load that up on my brush. And now with that brush, I'm just going to start at the top and just start doing nice horizontal strokes and work my way down. Now the further down we go, the more you're going to see that liquid white that we put in is mixing with that blue, and it's already giving us a nice sky color and texture. So I'm going to work my way back down here. We're going to want to cover the sky about halfway down. And again, nice smooth brush strokes. If you want to, you can press the B button there, and that will slow those brush strokes down for you, give you a little bit more control. And we'll see some nice blending going on here. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to work my way a little bit lower than what we are right now. You can see it's starting to get a little bit thinner. I'm just going to clean that off, get a little bit of fresh blue on there. Work my way a little bit lower. You can see I covered some of that stuff up that I had blended before, and that's okay. Clean that off. Work our way back up. If you did a little bit too much, I'm going to reset that like I just did there. I'm just going to grab a little bit more white and just work that white back up into it. If you've ever looked at the horizon line and compared the colors of blue from the horizon to what's above it there, you'll notice that the higher in the sky the blue is, the darker the blue it is, the more saturated blue that it is. The closer you get to the horizon line, the lighter the blue that it is. So we want some nice lighter blues coming on down here towards the lower horizons. Which means that if you're finding it to be too light on top, you can just grab, let's reset that and wipe that off. You can just grab some of that pure blue again, start from the top in each corner there, and again just kind of work your way down. And work that back up a little bit. There we go. Then we'll get some nice smooth transitions there. And if you noticed, if it's hard for you to smooth it out with the 2-inch brush, you can put that 2-inch brush down. You can grab that blender brush there, and again with your little knob, your analog stick there, you can make it thinner or thicker. I'm just going to go with the thickest, and we're just going to go back and forth here and kind of just smooth out some of that sky texture that we have going on here, just so that the lines aren't quite so harsh. We're going to be going in and adding some clouds soon anyways, so we don't need to worry too much. But this blender brush is awesome. I really love working with it. Again, just a little tip when you're working with things, not the blender brush, but with other brushes, remember the paint stays on there until you wipe it off. So make sure you're wiping it off before you're mixing other colors or doing anything like that. Alright, I'm going to put that down. Okay, now we're going to move on to the clouds. So I'm going to grab our bristle fan brush. You can swap it to a smooth fan brush if you would like. I'm going to leave it on the bristle. I don't think for this one it really matters. I'm going to increase our size a little bit, reset that palette, and I'm just going to move my grip here. Remember to move your grip. Use your middle finger there, hold it, and you can change how your hand is holding the brush there. So I'm going to go about right there. Just going to load this up with white, and I'm going to start dabbing it in here where I want some clouds. And if you notice it blending really easily into the blue, you can always go into your settings and change your canvas mixing sensitivity. Right now I have it quite low because I want to get a nice pure white on there, but if you want it to be mixing more, then you can set it back up. We'll set it back up a little bit later, but just a reminder there. Okay, we'll continue with this brush here. Okay, I wanted to get just that layout there, and I'm going to go back into my settings and change it back to that default that we have there. And with that bristle fan brush, I'm just going to start moving some of this around a little bit, filling it in underneath. in between, when you're blending things like that, if you get too dark of a color like I did just right there, you can either undo it. I'm going to leave it because we'll fix it. But then make sure you wash your brush off before moving in and doing any other blending with the other parts that you're blending. Alright, now from here I'm going to grab that blender brush again, and I'm simply just going to push this paint in the direction that I want it to go. So you can see there was quite a bit of texture on these clouds right now, but I'm just kind of fluffing these out with this brush, and it's giving us really nice fluffy clouds there, and we're just pushing that paint through where it was thickest, really spreading those out. And you can continue to do that for as much as you'd like. I think I like that one actually how it is, so I'm going to move over to this one. But if you're ever wanting to get rid of any texture that you see on there, this blender brush is awesome for that. It really smooths it right out, and it allows you to push and pull that paint in directions that you want it to go. Pull a little bit back down into there. Alright, and there's our clouds. That's it. So technically up to this point we've wanted things to blend together. We want the sky and the clouds to blend together, but now we don't really want anything else to blend in with the background. So if you want, you can go into your menu here and you can click on the second on the left tab, and there's your layers. You can start painting on layer 2 if you like, because we're done with the background. We don't need anything to blend in with it. You can just go right to there. If you want to though, you can leave it, and I'm just going to leave it as is, and we can work from there. So our next step is putting in that nice mountain in the middle there, mountain range there. So we're going to grab our palette knife, trusty palette knife, and I'm going to bring our actual palette up here. I'm going to just reset that. And if you've looked at mountains far away, then you'll see they kind of have a bluish tinge to them in the regular daylight. And so we're going to take some of our black here, and we're going to grab some of this darker blue and make a nice dark color. When you're working with, just like we did with the sky there, when we're working with mountains, we want to lay down the darkest layer first. It's kind of that base layer, and from there we'll add on the lighter layers and the highlights. So with that palette knife, I'm just going to block in the mountains. And I guess what I should do first, I'm just going to set that down for a second. I'm going to turn down my canvas mixing sensitivity because I don't want it to mix very much right now. Again, you could just use a different layer. And we're just going to map out where we want these mountains to go. So I want the tallest peak to pretty much be in the center, maybe just slightly off the center here. And you might end up overlapping some of these clouds a little bit, and that's okay. So we're going to have it come down to there. We'll have another little peak coming up over here, and it's going to go down to the edge. Going to get a little bit more of that on here. Now with this one, we're going to come down. I just turned on the hand stabilizer for this because I am quite a shaky person. Over here it's not too big of a deal because we might end up covering that up anyways. And now all I'm going to do is touch up that guy right there, touch up that guy right there, add a bit more in here. Notice that the flatter you hold that palette knife against the canvas, the more coverage it gets you. And now all I'm going to do here is just start filling in the rest where I want the mountains to go. So I'm going to go about that far down into there. And if you want to, you can start to actually kind of map out where these mountains are actually going, the direction they're going to be going in. Okay, maybe a little bit more, just right here. There we go. All right, whenever you're doing nature paintings, you always want to make sure you know where your light source is from. So in our case here, actually I'll keep the palette knife. Our light source is going to be coming from up at this angle here. So our lightest highlights are going to be down on this side, on the light side, and your shadowy sides will have your medium highlights. They're still going to have highlights, but just not as bright to really give that definition between the two. So what we want to start doing is we want to start adding some of these highlights in. So I'm going to bring this palette up, and I'm going to just put some of this color down on our little tray here, just so in case if I run out I can add some back in. And I'm just going to add a little bit of white into here. There you go, that's given us, you can see that there, obviously a color that's lighter than what we were working with, but still decently dark. It's going to set my palette back down there. And if you take your palette knife and if you turn it at an angle, and if you press it against the canvas at an angle, it's going to give you a really nice texture. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have it at a nice angle here. I might even use that stabilizer there. And you can play with that angle that you need. And actually what I should do here too, turn that mixing sensitivity back up, because that's going to help us get some nice texture here on our mountains as we're going through. We'll turn that down in a minute when we're adding the nice white snow, but for now we want it on there for a little bit. So I'm going to continue to push that down. And if you have that mixing sensitivity up, it might take you a few layers to really get that in there, because it really does start to mix with it, but that adds nice layers that we'd miss otherwise. And we are going to do the same on the shadowy side here. And it's important here that you keep the direction of your strokes in the direction that you want that texture to be going. If you go up and down, your mountains are going to look up and down. And so you really want to keep that angle at the right angle while you're working your way down. Keep those strokes as good as you can. One more spot over here. We're going to add a bit more. Okay. Now all I'm going to do, again here, I'm going to put a little bit down here just in case. I'm going to get a bit more white and just mix that in as well. And if it gets a little too brown, which I've noticed it does, I think it's because of the black, I'm just going to actually reset my palette here. Take just some of that blue and some white. So I'm trying to keep it, I don't want to add too much. Still makes it a little bit brown, but it is quite a bit lighter. So now with this one, just same thing that we were doing before. I am going to turn down that sensitivity a bit here. Just make it a little bit easier on ourselves, because it is mixing a little bit more than what I want it to do here. Just for these high peaks too. And then if you want it to be not so broad, just turn that in a little bit. That one was a bit too much. Just going to hit the undo button. That's the lovely part of this app. Again, a little bit too much. Okay, and now we're going to do the same on the back side here, but I'm going to keep it quite angled here. Actually, what I think we need to do with that side, I'm going to make it, I'm going to add in a little bit more right here. Before I do the shadow side, just a note when you're doing mountains, mountains usually have little stream beds, little, I guess, mini valleys you could say in them, so you can add some of those in there just by kind of scraping that in, showing little pathways that these mountains might have in terms of their little streams. What I want to do for the other side of the mountain here, I'm going to take some of this darker stuff again, mix that in. The highlights I think were already too light for the shadow size, so I just wanted to make it a little bit darker. There we go, that's better. A little bit too thick there. That angle is important. This side of this mountain, though, is going to have some sun on it because it's behind our bigger mountain. And so we're going to add that in here. All right. So now I want my lightest highlights. And for that, I just want to use white. So I'm going to grab some white here. So this is the snow that's on the mountain here. And we want that lightest white to really just be on the side where the sun is shining. Gonna add some right on the tops there, these mountain peaks, and again, this one back here is getting some sun on the back side, so we're adding a little bit to there as well. Alright, once you feel like you have your mountains where you want them, you have your highlights where you want them, then that's it. We have a nice mountainside there. We can wipe off that palette knife and set it back on the rack there. Now we're going to move into the foreground a little bit. Before we do anything with the foreground, we are going to we are going to do the lake in front, and then we're going to work on the shoreline and the trees and everything around it after that. So for our lake, we've already got the liquid white down here. Again, if you did start painting on a different layer, you might want to just lay a little bit of liquid white there again, paint thinner and white, just spread a little bit down there. We're going to grab our 2-inch brush here. I'm going to change my grip so I get a nice horizontal grip here. Reset that palette. We're going to grab some of the phthalo green down in there and some phthalo blue. And all we're going to do with these two colors here, it's going to give us a nice, ooh, that's a little bit too dark. Undo that. It's going to give us a nice dark turquoise color here. And we're just going to simply spread that through. And you'll see that liquid white is mixing in with it nicely, giving us some different textures throughout in different colors. And I'm going to put this, oh, we went up a little bit too high there. Turning my wrist a little bit there. We're going to put this right up into there. We'll work on some finishing touches for this lake at the end. That's all we need to do for it right now. I'm going to put that brush down. There we go. All right, now to do the trees that are on that side of the shoreline, we're going to grab our fan brush again, our bristle one, and you can adjust the size of it here. As you can see, you can go bigger or you can go smaller. I'm going to go about halfway up, and with this we're going to take some, grab my palette here, I'm going to grab some of this green, put this in the middle here, grab some of this brown, mix that in, and actually a little bit of black as well. It's going to be a really dark green. That's very, very dark, and that's okay. All you're going to do with this is you're going to keep your brush vertical, and you're simply just going to go in along the shoreline and just start dabbing these trees in. It's funny, when I first started painting trees, you know, or even I guess growing up, I always thought trees had a certain shape to them. But if you ever just watch trees, that sounds weird, or just look at trees, they're all different shapes and sizes. And the thing about nature is nature isn't uniform. Nature is very, very, very random. And so don't worry if these aren't all the same shape, the same size. That's not important. As you get to the middle of the painting, you're going to want your trees to be a little bit shorter. And as you get to the edges of your painting, you're going to want them to be a little bit taller, because our shoreline is going to be curved. And so the edges are actually going to be closer to the viewpoint than where the back of the lake is going to be. So we want to make these trees in the middle be the shorter ones compared to the further ones. So just go through, dab those out. Again, you can make these side ones a bit taller. They're going to cover a little bit of the mountain there in the back, and that's totally fine. That's why we're doing these layers, right? Our canvas mixing sensitivity is still down, so these trees really aren't mixing in with the mountain behind, and that's fine. We don't need them to. We are going to turn it back up in a minute here. Okay, as we work down this side, our trees are actually going to start to kind of come down a little bit, but again, we are going to be covering some of this up, so you don't need to worry too much about this right side here. Okay. Alright, that's our base layer. Just like we did with the mountains, we just did a nice dark base layer of trees there. Now I'm going to grab some of this lighter blue, mix some of that in with that. I'm actually going to take a little bit of white too. Hopefully that wasn't too much. We'll find out. Yeah, that's a little bit much. Takes a little bit more green. But oftentimes coniferous trees, they're a bit more muted than deciduous trees, and so I'm just kind of making this a bit more muted. And now you're just going to go through and do the exact same thing that you just did, but with this new green that we got. And I'm still not digging that green. I'm just going to reset here. I do want... That was way too much white. Okay, that's going to be kind of our final green. I like that for a final green color. But for the rest of it, let's see here what we get. Now we can use this color. And we're just dabbing it in just like we did before. And if you find it to be too much, too bright, if you turn up that canvas mixing, sensibility, then it will blend in a bit with that darker background that we put in there. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this side because we are just going to end up covering that up. Okay, and now I'm going to use this lighter one as kind of our final layer of, it's a bit more white added to it. There we go. Our final kind of highlights onto these trees. Just dab that in. All right, there's our trees. If you step back, take a look at that, you'll see you have some nice trees on that line. So now what we're going to do in order to kind of create a little bit of a reflection, we're going to grab that 2-inch brush. With that, make sure it's cleaned off. I still had stuff on it there. And I'm just going to take it and just lightly brush up and down here. Bring some of these colors down into the water. And if you really want those colors to be brought down in a bit more, you can even just kind of dab in those colors into the water there. I'm going to just dab in some of these colors. Even the darker that we got here, dab those in a bit. And then from there we're just going to take that blender brush and just going to push some of that around in here. If you go too high, just undo it. We are going to add in a shoreline still, so don't worry too much about that. But just going to blend that around to give us a little bit of a reflection into the water there. Again, don't worry too much about that far side. Okay, set that down. Now we're going to work a little bit onto a shoreline. For the shoreline, I'm just going to use our smooth flat, and I'm going to have it pretty small actually. I'll leave our palette as is because I'm going to use some of that green again, but I'm going to take some of this brown, and I do want to just lay this down kind of by itself here, so I'm just going to go in here. Sometimes that menu's a bit finicky. There we go. Just turn down that sensitivity again. Actually, you know what? Let's try it. Let's leave it as is. So we got some of this brown on here. And we're going to just bring that down to the shoreline there. So I'm basically just bringing the shoreline down to where I have the lake. There. It's nothing too special. And I'm taking it up to where kind of that white line is. So as you get to the back of the lake, we do want that shoreline to be a bit smaller because it is further away from the viewer. I'm just going to go through and kind of smooth that along a little bit. Make sure it is where I want it. Okay. From there, you can use that same brush if you'd like, or you can use this angle brush. I'm going to use the bristle angle brush, same size as what a default kind of is there. And I'm just going to take some of this some of this green, and we're just going to go through and just dab it in there. And this is going to create a nice grass texture along our shoreline. And I'm doing it high enough that it goes a little bit into the trees to make that transition line between the trees and the shoreline a bit more smooth. And we're taking it right down to the shoreline. Not as thick right by the shoreline, but pretty much right down to it there. Oh, that one went a bit too low, so I'll undo that. And it is mixing a bit with that brown, and that's totally fine. That's giving it a nice texture, nice color to it there. And I think it's important here that you keep your brush strokes angled toward the shoreline, because that gives it more of the reality that, you know, the plants are on that shoreline, they are angled, they are going down towards it there. As you get to the back, you may have to turn that brush horizontal though, because that shoreline is quite a bit smaller. And I'm just going to change my grip on this here, so alright, once you have that layer done, if you want to just grab some of that pure green, and here you can, if you want, turn that sensitivity down, grab some of that green, and touch up any of the spots where you want it to be more green. Feel free to do that right now. And then all we're going to do on top of that is we're just going to take some of this nice yellow down here, and we're just going to do the exact same thing one more time, and this is going to give a nice illusion of flowers all along this shoreline here. You can do them as thick or as sparse as you would like. Alright, I'm going to turn that sensitivity back on. And just going to grab that blender brush here again, and I'm going to shrink it down actually, and just kind of go along the shoreline here and just dab that brush around and push some of that paint around. At the end, if you're end of the lake, if you have more white, that's totally fine, because most often when you look at a lake, the faraway shoreline looks a bit more white compared to anything else. And you can grab your palette knife, and we're going to turn it nice and sideways here and put a little bit of pressure onto there. And if you just kind of rub it sideways along there, we're just going to add as if there are ripples of water coming off of the shoreline all throughout here. The more the pressure you put on, the more paint you're going to scrape off. Alright, so really you could stop right here and you would have a beautiful landscape painting. If you would like to continue, you can, and we're going to just add one more little feature to it. But if you want to stop here and just keep your painting as it is, you've got a beautiful masterpiece right here, a nice Bob Ross landscape. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a little tree into this side, to our right side, if you can see my hand there, and a little bit of an island, or maybe it's just the foreground right up in here. So in order to do that, I'm going to leave these greens that we got there. Actually, I'm going to just bring some of these greens down here. And some of this darker green as well. Okay, and I'm going to reset my palette there because I do want to use some black. And to start, I'm just going to use the 2-inch brush, get some black on there. If you want to mix it with a little bit of green, a little bit of brown, that's probably a good idea. And we're just going to go in, and you're just going to pick a spot and you're just going to paint it up. Now, what I'm going to do to get so it doesn't mix as much again, turn down that color sensitivity, grab that brush, rinse it off, because I do want this color to be very solid in here. So we're going to mix this in here. I turned on that hand stabilizer. And it's going to come about a third, well, maybe about a quarter of the way. Yeah, about a third of the way out onto our canvas there. Alright, you can put that brush down. We're going to leave that for now. We are going to grab our bristle fan brush again, and we're going to, I'm going to take some of that same color. And this is the fun part. This is the part that Bob always likes. We're just going to pick a spot, obviously within the range of our little inlet here, and that's where we're going to want our pine tree to start. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to go right there and bring it all the way down. Again, if you have a really shaky hand, if you hold B, it gives you a nice ruler line. So if that's where I want to go, then that's what we can do there. And then just tap it to get it off again as well. And pine trees are always a little bit tricky when you're bringing them up front. They add a bit more to it. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to add the dark layer first, just like we've done this whole painting. And right on top here, I'm just going to make it nice and thin. And as we work our way down, our pine tree is going to get a little bit wider. So I'm just going to turn this brush horizontal and just start dabbing this in here. And again, nature's not perfect. If you've ever looked at some pine trees, they're pretty scraggly in certain spots. Some of them are really thick and nice, but they definitely aren't perfect. So we're going to add this down here. If some spots get a little bit thicker than others, that's okay. We're going to add some other colors on top to help add our layers and differentiate between branches and stuff. But don't go too wide too soon, because then you're going to have a very, very wide tree when you get to the bottom. And we don't want it to be too wide at the bottom. So you can see we're covering up some of that other paint at the bottom there. And that's fine. Some of it still might be able to be seen once we're totally done, and that's why we did paint it behind instead of just leaving it blank. I want to make the trunk just a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to add a little bit more in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with this darker green that I saved, and we're going to do exactly what we did, just barely, but we're going to do it with this green. And if you go out a little bit further with this color, that's totally fine. And we're actually going to use this color again down on the bottom here as kind of grass. So I'm just going to just quickly dab in a little layer of grass here with that color. Okay, now I'm going to take this lighter, oh, that didn't work, brush that off. Take this lighter green, again that exact same thing that we just did. Don't you just love dabbing things in? Oh, that was a little bit thick in that one spot, so I'm just going to adjust that. And again, our light source is coming from the right here, so with this lightest green, I'm going to do that kind of, oh, that was too much. Do that just on this side of, mainly on this side of the tree, to show that that is where our light source is coming from. There can be a few spots over here. Light might get through a little bit, and that's fine. Right on top, we'll add, that was too much. Add a little bit there. We'll cross that trunk line a few times. And there's our tree. Now with this lighter green, I'm going to go in and again dab into that grass, make a nice grassy appearance. Underneath of that tree it's going to stay dark because that sun obviously isn't going to get to the tree. Just turn the brush the way you want, turn your brush the way that you want the grass to be flowing. But you can see these bristle brushes really give a nice grassy texture. And then if you want to, you can add like little bushes. I'm just going to take our yellow here and just dab in that yellow, kind of in little formations here throughout, just to match the background there where we have a lot of yellow flowers along the shoreline. If you want to add any more detail or layers into this, you can dab in some brown. It's going to be way too light. I take some orange into here. Like a nice light orangey color. We're just going to dab that nice light orangey color in there because it's obvious. Oh, that's a little bit too thick there in that spot. Grass and ground isn't always a nice perfect green, but if we add a little bit in there, then that gives it a bit more texture and a little bit more to it. Alright, now if there's any finishing touches you want to add, if there's any extra blending you need to do with the shoreline, with this front piece, with their tree or anything, now is the time to do that. When you're finished, you can go into the menu here, and you can leave that as is, but you can go to the save button here. Make sure you save your painting so you don't miss it, or something isn't saved that you finished and you don't have to go back and do it. And then if you want to, you can always hit the export button there, and you can share it to wherever you would like, or export it to the device, and then you can make your prints of it if you would like. And now you are ready to start a new painting and go from there. So again, thank you for following along. This one was a lot of fun. We'll head out to our closing screen now. So thank you for joining me here today in painting this Bob Ross landscape. I hope you learned something new that you can take on to your next painting. And as always, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss new videos and new tutorials on my channel. And we'll see you next time here on Brian Sloan Artist.